Do you have a website?
Are you exposing your customers' personal information?
Are you unintentionally violating privacy laws and even your own privacy policy?
Don't wait for a hack or an expensive data breach to catch you off guard.
Get Locker and make your site safe and compliant.
Companies that care about their customers use Locker on their sites to protect their customers and block data thieves.
Locker gives website owners an easy, no-code solution that can be up and running across their site in minutes.
Visit locker.com for details. That's LOKKER.com.
This episode is brought to you by Paycor, the HR and payroll software made for leaders. It's never been harder to recruit, hire, and engage workers. That's why HR leaders and frontline managers depend on Paycor for all things people management. From onboarding and performance reviews to compensation and benefits. Learn more at paycor.com/leaders.
So I don't know if you guys have been reading the headlines, but apparently there's a ransomware gang that compromised the LA school district, which is one of the biggest in the country.
How big is it?
Has 600,000 students.
The main thing here is that the school district said, under the instruction of the federal government, to not be willing to pay any ransom. And so the school district said that they were not going to pay ransom. And so accordingly, the Vice Society, who are the guys behind this hack, have just done this massive information dump of 500 gigabytes of data exfiltrated from the school system.
How much data is that? It sounds like a lot of data.
It's quite a bit. It has, among other things, social security numbers, some medical information on students, which is really troubling, things about contractors and employees of the school district and so on. So it's a pretty major hack.
Aren't there some psychological assessments of students, too?
Yeah, that's right. And so that's all now just kind of floating around on the dark web.
That's really disturbing. I mean, I first of all, am very upset about anybody that thinks they should be attacking a school district and releasing children's information. I mean, that's pretty low. But then again, there are guys that attack medical facilities all the time and put people's lives in danger. So I guess there's no low when it comes to low.
What's our best advice for the parents out there who are facing this situation? Mine, I guess, would be to set the kids up with credit monitoring. What about you?
Credit freezes too. Definitely freeze their credit.
Dark web monitoring, I'd say, is one of the big ones. That just each time that data ends up in a new place, each time that data ends up in a new archive, you're going to want to know about it.
So, parents who want to protect their kids who might not be in this particular district, but are somewhere else in the country, there are some things they can do. Adam, you brought up credit freezes. I think, having credit checks, deep web monitoring. Kids don't have bank accounts, but they do have social media accounts, and those can be protected by a variety of means, including, as you like to point out, two-factor authentication.
Well, anything that can be done to better protect a child's social media account is great. Actually, some of us believe anything that can be done to convince your child not to have a social media account would be a good idea too, but that's never going to work.
No, and then even I remember when my kids were grown, when they were little, long before they were 13, and it was allowed, they had secret accounts, and so my children were 20. I mean, if you go by when they signed up for social media, they're both in their 30s right now.
But I do think this goes back to the whole issue of bringing cyber hygiene into the household as early as possible and convincing your kids that they're not only protecting themselves, but they could be protecting the entire family and ultimately daddy or mommy's business by being as cyber hygienic as possible.
All right, let me ask you guys this question. Adam, do you have a burner password that you use on things where it doesn't matter, like parking meters and, parking apps and stuff like that?
Yes.
Okay. Does your kid know that burner password?
No.
Travis, does your kid know your burner password, or do you know no such thing in Travis land?
There's no such thing in Travis land. I had one maybe like 15 years ago and have really just kind of worked to get rid of any account that still has the old burner password on it.
I have one. I have two. I might even have three, but I have one for sure. That is my going to the movies and checking out password. And also, if you want to watch Netflix on my dime, it's my password for Netflix. And my kids know it. My kids do know it. And that is something that I think is true for a lot of parents, even though you two are cyber savvy.
Change your password.
Yeah. So much easier.
Kids are awesome, but unfortunately, kids can become weapons of mass destruction within a family when it comes to cyber. But that's why it's important to monitor your kids also, to know what they're doing.
Yeah, that became a lot more urgent for me when my son, when he was still a toddler, figured out how to get around the parent controls on his Kindle and ordered himself a book.
What book did he order?
Thankfully, it was just Green Eggs and Ham, which is pretty anodyne. I mean, that's a lot of people's first book. So, yeah, nothing too dangerous, not the Anarchist Cookbook or anything like that.
Yeah, because, if he gets the Anarchist Cookbook and he gets lucky with that, yeah, you definitely would be having some issues. Even in Portland, where they seem to smile upon such behavior.
Yeah, not so much.
Welcome to What the Hack, a show about hackers, scammers, and the people that go after. I'm Adam, Cyber Who?
Well, I'm Beau, Cyber What?
I'm Travis, Cyber Grinch.
And today, we're talking with lockpicker, physical penetration specialist, and security expert, Deviant Ollam. We're really excited today to have Deviant Ollam with us on our show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really great to be here.
So, are you allowed to tell us where you're from?
These days I'm from the internet, right? Which means I swear too much, get frustrated at little things, but try to tackle big things with aplomb and grace. Originally, I guess the answer is I'm from back east, from Philadelphia.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm from Philadelphia.
Now, are you from the Rocky Balboa part of Philadelphia? Was that Fishtown?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not from Fishtown. No, I went from West Philadelphia to Western Montana to sort of West Seattle, just bouncing along. There used to be a Forrest Gump joke in there, like I'd hit the water and turn around. But honestly, no, the West Coast, between Montana and the Pacific Northwest, some of the best places I've ever lived.
Yep.
100%. Now, I got to ask you, if you've been in Western Montana, have you spent any time at the Chapel of the Dove?
I haven't.
In Missoula. Do you know about it?
I lived in Missoula.
Now, it must be gone then. When I was in that area, there was a movie theater called the Chapel of the Dove, and the man who ran it actually had a pigeon on his head when you bought a ticket from him. And that's where I saw Raising Arizona. But this was a long time ago,
Amazing.
So it may have...
No, I didn't know it. I didn't spend as much time there as I might have liked. I was only living in Montana for a little over a year. I was getting increasingly strident and angry letters from the DMV informing me that I still hadn't purchased a Subaru Outback, and they would have to revoke my permit to live in the state. So, yeah, didn't get on it. They booted me out.
I wish I had known you. Now, Adam called you Deviant Ollam, and that is not how I would pronounce your name.
Yeah.
In writing. So, and actually, Northwest, there is a text called the Wallam Ollam, which is an origin story of the natives in that area. That's not what it refers to, I'm guessing.
No.
How do you get an F out of an M?
So it's Celtic. It's a Celtic surname. And Olaf sometimes rendered a little bit differently, depending on where you are in different counties over in Ireland. But my understanding is there were different sort of levels of learning and scholarship, and this is in pre-written tradition, right? You basically had oral histories and oral learning, and knowledge was passed by telling stories and epic poems. So Olafs were a rank of scholar that had not attained the topmost rank. They had learned most of what they could from the place of their origin, and essentially spent a time on tour, just going around to different shires and counties and singing for their supper, as it were, educating those who wanted education, being paid for that, and learning from the people there, learning the news, learning the histories and the epics from that region and carrying that with them. So I liked the idea very much of being a peripatetic, penetrator and peripatetic professor, and a wandering person who likes to teach but recognizes there's more to learn.
Like us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are
exactly, Adam.
We view ourselves as wandering minstrels. We just wander the cybersphere.
So, Adam, your name now from here on out, you will be known as Adif. We're going to change out of.
Yeah, you followed the go west, young man theory.
I have crisscrossed a number of times, and right now the joke is, my cats and books live someplace static, but I live in seat 2A, generally on some aircraft.
And that is because you do penetration testing, physical penetration testing all around the country. And I see, behind you, for our listeners that you can't see, that behind Olaf there's a rack of keys, and it looks like an entry point of entry keypad. For a gate or something like that. There's various. There's a phone. There's a payphone.
Yes.
Oh wow, that's a federal offense right there.
There's a payphone. There's this phone over here.
So what is it that you do? Like, what is that? Are you on a plane all the time because you're traveling around to go and break into joints?
Many times, yeah. We wear a lot of hats at our various companies. I do education as much as I do consultation. But when I'm not in a classroom teaching people about locks and security, I am invariably on site, usually breaking some locks and security. So we do that in the form both of what would be, the sort of corporate speak would be adversarial emulation, or in the hacker world, let's be bad guys. Let's break in. Let's be a professional thief with no consequences. Or I get invited to a lot of army bases where somebody has either lost a combination or forgotten a combination to a safe or a vault. And again, with the sanitized suit and tie language, I neutralize various government classified document containers. What that means is, I drill in, I slice, drill, torch, whatever it takes to get in and get the container open.
So in other words, if someone were to lose the nuclear football, would you be the guy that would say, wait, I have the code here for you?
I'm glad to say I would not be that guy, and I'm happy to not have the responsibility of anyone that serious. Most of my jobs are a little more low stakes. We do government work from time to time, but a lot of our work is private sector. So
But you have plasma torches, and do you have like the good stuff? Do you have what do you got? You got some good tools?
I do have a lot of now torch. So thermal cutting is, you need to get a burn permit and a lot of other things to do that to a container. So in an office environment, instead of dragging something out to the loading dock or spreading down the blankets, it's nice if you can just do cutting. Cutting's pretty loud, but it's contained.
How did you get started with this?
The trite answer that's cutesy and good for the press and a soundbite is some of the right friends, some of the wrong friends. But buried within that is truth. I was fortunate enough to be born innately with a sense of both wonder and disrespect for rules. But also I was fortunate enough to have just enough barriers and just enough parents backing me up if I got into small trouble to not let me get into big trouble. I could have easily become a very boring person if I wasn't more adventurous, but I could also easily have become an incarcerated person or something if I didn't have a few boundaries and a few get out of jail free cards with parents willing to talk to teachers and say, no, he's just trying something his way. But if it didn't hurt anything, give him more of that assignment. Don't take away the computer, the device, the electronics lab.
Is this like the communities where people either become the priest or the cop or in prison?
Yeah, it's I don't like to think we are all so determined down at our core, but we're all a product of our inputs, right? And I had just the right amount of inputs to make me not respect the rules, but also not completely hamstrung by the consequences of rule breaking.
Now, this was in Philadelphia where you learned this?
Yeah, back east, Philadelphia, the New Jersey area. That's when I was growing up, mostly back east. But it never really left me the spark of, well, why do it that way? Why should we do it that way? Just because we've always done it that way.
Blockchain, NFTs, AI. What does this mean for you and me?
If you're looking for the best answer, check out TED Tech, the podcast that brings you the latest innovations and biggest ideas in tech.
Tech is evolving fast, from the metaverse to the watches on our wrists, and you'll hear about it all on the TED Tech podcast.
like why people in AI make good business partners.
The future of self-driving robotaxis.
And what the next generations of Siri, Alexa, and Google might look and sound like.
Find TED Tech wherever you get your podcasts.
Some people say the metaverse will only be virtual. One day, farmers will use augmented reality to monitor the health of their soil and run irrigation simulations to help ensure the best yields. And urban planners will model traffic solutions in the metaverse to help decrease commute times, paving the way for less congested cities. The metaverse may be virtual, but the impact will be real. Learn more about what Meta is building for the metaverse at meta.com/metaverseimpact.
You sit at an interesting place where you're a security expert dealing with both physical penetration and cyber.
Most certainly. Most certainly. You really can't divorce the two. In fact, I would say you can't divorce the three. I'm a big fan, as are many others in this industry, of reminding people that security exists kind of on three surfaces that mate together in unique ways. There's sort of physical, mechanical. Then you have digital, which can mean your network security or your ones and zeros or your electronic locks. And then you have the human surface. And all of those surfaces have different roles to play. And it's nice when they're all in layers. You think about, I'm going to say Jesse Singer's book, There Are No Accidents. She talks about the Swiss cheese model of security and how if you have holes of Swiss cheese, like a single hole of Swiss cheese, a single slice of Swiss cheese, there might be a hole that something could pass through. But if you stack a couple slices up, well, then maybe they will occlude the holes. And you stack enough slices of Swiss cheese up, even though they have holes, you can eventually get to a point where no light is coming through. There's no direct through line vulnerability. And when physical security, digital security, human security, when they're all stacked on one another, none of them will be perfect, but ideally they're all covering each other's back. Many times, though, we substitute one for the other. We say, well, the digital side of that machine's not too good. We'll put a lock on the door. Or that lock is a little bit sketchy, but we'll have a guard come around every so often.
Which of those three types of cheese has the biggest holes, in your opinion?
Ooh, that's so interesting that it's never one uniform answer. Very different environments. You might have an environment where the people are actually the strongest layer, which we don't, we always love to say, oh, well, humans are the weakest link. And there's truth to that saying. It comes from a place of validity. But there are some environments. In fact, I was on a job where the human element, maybe we'll get into this story later. It's an agribusiness job that we did. The human element was stronger than everything else at that facility, and it shut us down at almost every turn.
I remember when I first got my house, I asked a locksmith to come out and put a lock on, and I said, is this a good lock? And he said, it doesn't really matter. And I said, why doesn't it really matter? And he says, because locks are for honest people. If a thief wants to come in, they're going to get in. And he used the example of taking a sawzall, mm-hmm. a reciprocating saw, and just cutting along the side of my door, mm-hmm. and cutting an opening in the side of my house to get into the house.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is it is a flaw of not thinking so much as a flaw of communication and framing. Friend of mine, Bruce Schneier, has a really great line that he's used in the past about the word. Let's start with the word security. To be secure, right? To be secure can mean an actual objective standard, like I am behind a high concrete wall and there is an angry dog who obeys my commands and I'm stroking the butt of a rifle that's latched to me with a large magazine. Like, you can be objectively secure against certain threats. But you can also say, well, that person over here, they're secure. Maybe you're talking about the emotion, the sensation, the idea, the concept of I feel secure. And of course, many times those two things are in tension. People want the feeling of security, even if they're not objectively secure. See, for example, an easy punching bag would be, the nation's airports, a lot of security theater there. Or there are people who actually are very secure, people in, I would say, most modern cities. We live in a very safe time. Violent crime is going down, but people don't always feel secure. And because of that, they make a lot of bad risk assessment and make a lot of bad purchases and decisions. If we extend this problem with framing, I will put it to you. Instead of the word lock, Let's go with the word fence. Okay. You might say a fence. Well, fences are for honest people. Yes and no. A fence, even a 3-foot tall fence, a little white picket neighborhood fence, easily jumped over by anybody of moderate physical means. That fence is still doing a job. It is demarcating, it is communicating, it is indicating a property line. It is communicating, hey, this is the space out there that's public, but inside this curtilage, maybe this isn't your space. And it is incumbent upon the public to behave in a way that they think is best. Now, you'd like people to respect that fence. The fence also does a job in terms of if there's a stranger in the yard, they can't really just say, oops, I'm just cutting through to get to my car. Oh, okay. But you jumped over a fence, right? You didn't just step around a bush. Oh, I'm not supposed to be in here. No, you're not supposed to be in here. So what that I would call is a symbolic fence at that point. But you could say, well, fences are just for, honest people. But if you look around, again, let's say our nation's airfields, let's say military bases, a high value facility that's doing specialized research and they don't want people coming and going, they're going to have a fence, but it's definitely a different fence, right? It's going to be 7 feet tall, maybe with a topper. It might be buried or trenched so you can't tunnel under it.
Electrified.
Yes. So the question is not, well, fences are just to make people stay honest. It's what fence are you using? And I would say the problem in our world is that many times we are putting the 3-foot white picket ornamental fence around the high value target. You're using a symbolic lock, as it were, on an actual high value asset. Symbolic locks exist in our world. How many people have been in an office where you're not allowed to touch the air conditioning, right? It's behind that little plastic thing with a little derpy wafer lock on it. Any one of you can jiggle that lock open. But you're not supposed to. You know that. But if we take that little derpy nothing lock and put it on a locked panel that controls, I don't know, all the power in the building or
the nuclear football.
Exactly, nuclear football, anything like that. That is the fault of the design. That is a bad framing where you're using a symbolic lock to perform a security role.
As part of your penetration testing career, have you broken into airports, for instance?
Or national defense targets?
I will say we have worked in those sectors. That is the
Can you tell us a sector adjacent story that might be?
Well, I can always tell you, it's easier for me to tell you stories that weren't definitely exactly my customers. So I can tell you things that have happened in airports where since I wasn't being paid to do anything and I wasn't on the contract, I'm not encumbered by any NDAs, right? There are definitely airports, and many people have been in airports where you've seen this, where you get in an elevator to go between different levels, go up to the Sky Lounge or the whatever, and the baggage levels down here. Look on the panel, you'll probably see other floors that might be locked out. Some of them are really interesting. They say, control tower or airport ops level or something like that. Some of these go between the sterile zone and the insecure zone, like the baggage piers down at the tarmac. This elevator is objectively not supposed to go between these various, very different zones without authorization. But years ago now, I put out a talk with a fellow named Howard. He and I built this lecture. It's just called elevator hacking, right? There are a lot of ways to get an elevator to go somewhere that you're not expected to let it go.
Because they have the derpy little locks?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are key switches. There are lockout cutout switches. There are different modes of operation. If you put an elevator into non-automatic mode, into maintenance modes, into emergency responder modes, it will go to these other floors. And I have footage of elevators in airports where you can see the fire jewel is lit. Like that elevator is on fire service. And even though it has this multi-factor chip and pin and biometric morpho reader on the wall, it's still going to go between different zones without, quote, authorization. Well, yeah, you are going with authorization. The authorization is high. I have this little $8 key on eBay, and fire code says the elevator has to do this.
And this is the part where we say to Beau, please put down your pen and stop taking notes on this, Beau.
I'm already. One of my favorite thoughts is like, how do you hack these things?
I'm going to really just dread the answer, but are we talking about past elevators or are these still security weaknesses that persist?
I'm proud to say that kudos to the institution involved. That airport did get word about this. And the one I'm thinking of, if you return to that airport, which many of us go through this airport very frequently throughout the hacker world, they have different key switches in the elevators that I have seen. So improvements are incremental and marginal, but you take the wins where you can.
But that is a good example of old technology in spaces where there's new technology that's sensitive. And I imagine a lot of what you do is finding the weakest point of protection for entry.
Oh, sure. I mean, a lot of our work is for higher tech companies, data centers and the like, ISPs. There's sort of a convergence there of you need security awareness. You need to be mindful about security, which plenty of organizations just aren't. And you need discretionary budget to be interested in testing and evaluating your security, which plenty of institutions don't have the money. You might say a bank. A bank has all the money in the world. But as far as mindfulness, well, they said, we have vaults, we have time clocks, we have all these things. Like, we don't need to, we'll test maybe with an internal team. We don't want to have external people. Or you might have a hospital environment. Medical environments, again, they're very aware of the need for security. They're very aware that their security might be lacking. But a lot of hospitals are cash strapped because we do healthcare very wrong in this country. So the data center, ISP, tech sector, they are the ones who both are aware of security needs and have the money to hire teams like us. So in data centers, there have absolutely been times where I have bypassed a door, been able to mask a sensor so that an alarm doesn't go off, or just sometimes you just say, all right, let's just not care. Let's just let this door register an alert and see what happens. And let's test the human element. And either an employee or a guard comes around a little while later looking to see who's in the data hall. But we're so ingrained into thinking that an intruder would be behaving in a certain way, either causing mayhem or stealing things. But if they encounter a person who's dressed in a company polo, has a badge that looks like a legit badge, and I'm using a key to unlock a rack because all the server racks in all America's data centers are key alike, and I'm checking some lights and I lock it back up, and that person will just kind of look down the hall. No, that's not it. That's another person working. And you just become invisible.
So this is more like social engineering even than having a set of tools that you're using to open things up.
That's definitely a part of it. If you're doing your job right, you want to give the client and the target opportunities to find you, opportunities to challenge you. We make the sparring analogy a lot, like in martial arts. If an instructor does nothing but blast someone right and square in the nose and that person drops to the mat and they say, okay, good lesson, right? Next week, same time? Yeah, they didn't really learn anything. You want people to start hitting you back. So you want to say, if I do this, what are you going to do? Now I'm coming at you this way. Can you block it? So ideally, you want to give the client and the customer more opportunities and say, all right, I'm going to break in this building. I'm going to try this way. What can make it a little bit noisier, but a little more obvious that something's wrong? And you see what happens when they respond. And they have to learn, their staff has to learn, that guy you saw and you walked right by, did you actually validate who they were? Did you check credentials? So yeah, we try to give them a chance. We'll say, all right, let's break in this time, but do it with a different tool that's not quite as covert. Maybe they'll notice.
Let me just tell you what I would do, and then you tell me if you're going to hire me or not. I think if I had to get into a facility where I wasn't supposed to be, my first attempt would involve a box of donuts and a cup of coffee that I was holding in my mouth as I walked up to the door and just sort of mumbled, hey, can you get the door for me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't like to steer too hard into capitalizing on marginalized stereotypes. But if someone is differently abled, if someone needs walking assistance, if someone's in a wheelchair, if someone is just, older, someone looks like they just can barely get the door open at all.
Or if somebody's really into coffee and donuts.
Yeah. Yeah. You combine all those things and society is filled mostly with nice people. They're mostly going to help let people in.
So when you do a job, what is, in your estimation, like the most shocking response you ever got to what you're trying to do to help somebody keep people like you out of their facilities?
There's different kinds of shocking. You want kind of a bit of an arresting deliverable to give to people if they need a wake-up call, if they need more buy-in maybe from elsewhere in their organization. You may have some people who truly do see a problem that needs to be addressed, and other people don't believe it's a problem. So we're brought in to demonstrate, no, this is very real. And sight unseen, we were able to discover this weakness. Or maybe you have someone who doesn't themselves think there's any need for anything special. They say, no, we're doing fine. This is a checkbox, right? And you want to deliver results that make them go, whoa, oh, wow, that's shocking. The real worst one that you hope to never have is a situation where you deliver a bunch of findings, you demonstrate impact, and it doesn't move the needle. You come back a year later and they say, well, okay, maybe we'll do something about that. Maybe we won't.
It's kind of like the most dangerous words in the English language when uttered by an inside guy is, don't worry, we got this.
Mm-hmm. We've always done it that way. When's the last time there's been a problem? Which there's a possibility that's true. Maybe someone lives in an incredibly safe area. There's just really no likelihood that they're going to be targeted. They're an innocuous business with no political enemies and motivations, and all their employees are happy and would never do anything to hurt the company. Maybe for that company, spending an extra, I don't know, $200-$300 to upgrade every single badge reader because their credentials are very outdated. Maybe that could be money better spent somewhere else. I'm not the client, and at some point at the end of the day, you have to put faith in the client. But there are sometimes it's a head scratcher where you say, "Man, all right. I mean, you're going to do what you guess you think is best, but talk to legal if you have a breach or a problem, an incident, and this report's in a drawer of all these things we found."
Hey, Beau and Adam, do you know why I like to use ExpressVPN?
Why?
It gives you a little bit of extra protection. Otherwise, it's sort of like leaving your kids in line with the nearest stranger while using the restroom.
Dude, come on. Is it really that bad?
It is, yeah. You can be exposed online if you're not really protecting what you're sending and receiving online. So
Okay.
that's why whenever I'm online, I use a VPN.
Every time you connect to an unencrypted network, if you're in a cafe, a hotel, airport, basically any network that's not your own, your online data it's not secured. Any hacker on the same network can gain access to and steal your personal data, passwords, financial details, you name it.
Okay, so I suppose ExpressVPN creates a secure encrypted tunnel between my device and the internet so that hackers can't steal my data.
That's right. Hackers can make some serious cash selling personal information on the dark web. But ExpressVPN has made it easier than ever to keep your info safe.
Just fire up the app, click one button, and you're instantly protected.
And ExpressVPN also works on all of your devices. So laptop, phone, tablet, it'll work on all of them and you can stay secure on the go.
Secure your online data today at expressvpn.com/WTH and get 3 extra months, wait for it, free.
That's expressvpn.com/WTH. expressvpn.com/WTH.
Are you that person who watches serial killer documentaries for fun?
Are you tired of girls from your high school messaging you about joining their pyramid scheme?
Not Another True Crime Podcast by Betches Media is the podcast for you. From crimes, cults, and conspiracies to scams and schemes, hosts Sarah Levin and Danny Murphy are covering true crime with a necessary dose of humor, so it's informative and fun to listen to.
Each week they pick one case and go through the facts, starting from the biography to the timelines and all the relevant updates.
Plus, they cover all the newest trending true crime documentaries and fill in the gaps with facts the filmmakers did not include. And you'll love their weekly games, including true crime trivia and breaking news headlines.
Danny and Sarah are like your two funniest friends talking about true crime. Listen to Not Another True Crime Podcast, now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
That's Not Another True Crime Podcast from Betches Media. Now, hey, Dave, I got to ask you. Now, let's say you bobble the coffee and donuts and you get through the door, and that was one of the tests. I imagine there are many levels of entry when it comes to some places. Let's say the place that you're your penetration testing is Kentucky Fried Chicken, which I believe now is called KFC, and your goal is to get the secret recipe for the fried chicken. And you have to, and there's two ways to get it. You can either get into the safe where it's written down by Colonel Sanders himself, or you can get it from a computer. I'm going to give you a test, and you tell me if it's a reasonable one. Steve, I want you to get in the building, and I will agree with you that we have a problem if you can get a thumb drive into the computer with the recipe and prove that you did it. Is that
original or extra crispy?
I'm just going to say original, because extra crispy is not as valuable a recipe, in my opinion.
This also reminds me of a SpongeBob episode where they stole the recipe from the Krusty Krab.
I don't understand why you don't just steal a Krabby Patty and all that confusion.
I'll be right back.
Oh, which, by the way, has anyone ever wondered how good those crab cakes must be?
Incredible.
They must be remarkable. Let's do that. Let's just say, could you get Mr. Krabs'
secret recipe?
Yeah.
Well, I would say the short quip of an answer is yes. Like, of course, anything's achievable. The key point is with what effort and time and money, right? What level of commitment on your adversary? And that's why risk modeling is very important. Yeah, anytime you have someone who says, well, we have this very critical asset and we've surrounded it with these layers of security, are we okay? Are we good? And our answer is, well, who's trying to steal it? Is this something that, like, an untrained smash and grab group of, like, do you have a jewelry store and your main risk is like smash and grab people on the street? After hours, they just try to break down the gate, get in and steal stuff? Or do you have dedicated attackers who are, let's go to the other super extreme, we'll say nation state level. If you have actual national secrets and your attackers have all the time in the world to just plan it out and almost unlimited budget, it's very hard to stand up against that kind of attacker, which is why most of our state secrets are guarded both by, mechanical and physical locks and also electronic monitoring. And they are designed to be, we're designed to alert upon any sort of attempted intrusions.
Is this part where we're supposed to ask you, are they really?
They are, in my opinion. I mean, having gotten into a number of secured vaults and containers over the years, I can tell you the only way I'm doing it is going to involve a lot of mess and disturbance and more than 30 minutes of effort. And ideally, you need a guard to come around every 29 minutes if it takes me 30 minutes to drill into the safe, and that's going to be part of the protection. But if you have corporate espionage, if you have corporate actors, if you're worried about, maybe you're worried about your own employees, maybe you're not. Your own employees you might say, well, we have the best lock on the front door of the building. Okay. Well, aren't your employees already in the building? Then what are you doing to protect the asset from the inside of the building? It's understanding who is your likely threat and what their capabilities and commitment is likely to be.
Well, this gets into some dicey waters, because let's just play the tape. If you have an issue where it's not, Plankton trying to get Mr. Krabs' recipe. This is Deviant Ollam being asked to penetrate a piece of IP at a big company, and you sit there and you scratch your head and you go, it's probably the easiest way to do this is to find an employee who's compromisable. Okay, now where do you draw the line? Because do you like engage in identity theft and figure out who has bad credit and then go after them and offer them 10 grand and boom, you're in? Or do you because that's how a state actor would do it. They would figure out who has the financial problems and they just offer him some money. How does it work?
Oh, it's absolutely like that. Now, do we leverage individual human actors on the inside? Seldom. That's considered in the industry. It's considered a little bit uncouth. It's considered crass to do. Also, we are restricted in ways that threat actors are not. There's no IRB. There's no internal review board, for like nation state attackers. But there are ethical principles where you can't leverage a human asset. You can't make someone part of a security exercise. If they're a 9-to-5 worker and they're going home at the end of the day Just like I wouldn't break into someone's personal house to steal their company laptop. Why? Well, because they're, at the end of the day, they've clocked out. Their house is their house. It's their own domain. And while there may be an element of their company security that's impacted if they're leaving their laptop, let's even just say their car. They leave their laptop in their car, parked on the street at night. That may be a very valid attack vector that someone might engage in, but whether I would do it or whether I would document it and say, hey, we walked by on the street and we found this car. And there's ways to approach that with the client that don't make people an unwitting participant. An unwilling participant in the test.
That's a good thing, but we know it's tough to train people to be uncouth if they're not naturally uncouth, and we know the criminals are uncouth. Yeah. So that's the line.
That's a hard line. It's an interesting one though, because where there's a real ethics question, you will take the picture rather than take the punch.
I would say yes, and I would say you can deliver some of the same impact upon giving the news. You say, I could have done this. Or let's take a little bit of the emotion out of it. Let's say I'm in a server environment, I'm in a server farm, and there's a secure cage over there, which is doing all of their financial processing. Those are the machines that do that. They might be interested in, I could lay hands on that cage and I could say, look, this is a picture of me touching I'm at the cage. And it's the same exact lock that I got through in those first 3 cages that got me this far. But if I actually crack the door or slide it open or step across that threshold, there's a litany of PCI compliance and the lawyers get involved, and I could be costing the client far, far more than they're actually deriving in value out of my services. And I can say, all right, can we just agree? Maybe we just agree that I could have easily gone into this cage. Okay.
Do you remember the story? It was a rather well-known insurance company that will go nameless in the Midwest that had a server that contained over 900,000 names with very sensitive data that was in a facility that was guarded, and they had 24-hour cameras, and someone came in and actually stole the server and took it out of the facility.
I believe I do remember that incident or something very similar. And yeah, it's remarkable. There was a job when we were told, can you steal a company laptop? That was one of the things. They said, we tell people in the office, it was downtown Bay Area, and they said, we're telling people they can't just leave their laptops unattended. If somebody gets into the office, it's an open environment, they could steal them. We haven't rolled out full disk encryption yet. They should use these little Kingston, Kensington locks. Okay, you're supposed to lock them up, and that wasn't happening, of course. So one of my objectives was steal a laptop, and I did, but I didn't do it by stealing a laptop and walking out, because they had asset tags, The guard said, hey, is that your laptop? We have to check them in, check them out. I stole 27 laptops, and I used a hand truck. And, I'm wearing a workman's overalls, and these are all getting rehashed. Okay. And the guy held the door for me. The guard he wasn't going to check that. Oh, you guys be doing something big.
So so it's like Edward Snowden tossing the microchip to the security guard as he goes through security on his way out with
his Rubik's Cube.
All the Rubik's Cube with all the NSA secrets. Like, see you later.
Hey. You ever play with one of these?
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Yeah. Just try it. It's hard.
Well, there was another one many years ago involving Wells Fargo, where 2 guys who worked in the mortgage department went on vacation, downloaded 40,000 files onto their laptops because they decided they were going to do work on the road, stopped at a gas station while they were gassing their car, went inside to get donuts, came back, and their laptops were gone. And that was a huge brouhaha for months. But it happens. Human element.
Yeah.
One of the things we talk about in this show is that people have a tendency not to change default passwords, which leave them open to all kinds of horrible things. And today you mentioned things about how elevators have different modes or access keys that are essentially default. So for the people listening, are there other examples like master keys or magic keys, basically a key that can open anything and they don't realize that that's available?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you mentioned it at the start. I've got a Door King access control panel sitting behind me on the wall, literally. So if I look in my little Shady Tell coffee mug here, I'm holding a Door King Systems key. This is the key, right, for Door King system cabinets.
And that's an access box you'd see at a gate or in front of an apartment building. That standard intercom remote door opener that you're opening with just a $10 key.
So I mean there's all your circuitry. There's your door relays. And I can just jump around anything I need to do. I can bypass and just trigger door opening events because I have this little $10 key.
So before we give you the key to escape the what the heck prison we have you in right now, what scares you? What when people finish with this episode, what would you recommend they do immediately? Like, do not pass go, do not collect $200, do this immediately.
Connect with networks of other people and friends and colleagues. We talk about humans as a weak surface in security, but frankly, humans are the best surface in the defense in the world. What scares me is nothing to do with the security industry. It's to do with the cold indifference of the universe and the systems in which we live. There's a talk I have coming out in just a couple weeks. I'll be at SaintCon in Utah. Maybe it's already happened by the time this goes to air, but the talk is called Lawyer, Passport, Locksmith, Gun. And it has to do with if you're desperately in need of any one of those things because there's a problem in your life, that's not when you should be looking for one of those things and trying to figure it out then when you're in a moment of crisis. Having a good team of people around you, having people that you already know and trust who you can turn to during an incident, that is far more valuable than any widget or tool or procedure. Yeah. There is no cavalry coming. We are the ones who protect us. We look out for us. We keep us safe. Having people around you that you rely on and can give you good advice when you're in a moment of crisis or threat. So you, the panicky animal with your brain half distracted, are not trying to make all the critical decisions then.
That's brilliant. And it's true. I live in a small town where I happen to know a lot of the trades people who work different things. And for instance, today I just called up my neighbor and was like, hey, you know a good well guy? And he goes, oh, I used to be a well guy. I'm going to come over and look at it for you.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, when we're in like the Walking Dead mode,
mm-hmm.
It's just your neighbors who are going to be doing all the everyday things.
Yeah.
And you have a collective of people who know how to do stuff.
Yeah.
Different stuff. And together you can make stuff happen.
And it's great you mentioned a well guy, plumbing. Like you have a plumbing problem at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, you take out the yellow pages. But Murphy is going to have the law that comes into effect, and your plumbing problem is going to be at 10:30 at night on a Saturday, and then you're in a crisis, and then whoever answers the phone first, even if they're the worst at the job,
is your guy
overcharging you, ripping you off. They might be who comes and helps because you didn't have a well guy.
Unless you happen to have Tony Vizzo, hey Tony, the plumber, who's a friend of yours, and you have his cell phone number. And you can be like, Tony, and he goes, what?
Mm-hmm.
I need you. Come.
We have Bob the electrician in Nashville.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And that is the thing, Adam, is like we have, as everyone who listens to this show knows, we have Travis.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But it is about being a communitarian, and I love that. I can't wait to hear that talk. Is it going to be on YouTube? Or?
I'm pretty sure. I believe SaintCon records everything, so I'm sure it'll wind up there. There's some heavy stuff in that talk, but I think it'll be good.
Thank you so much. I mean, we appreciate the knowledge you shared with us, your good sense of humor, and the fact that you were willing to come on and actually spend time with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me so very much.
I'm going to go home and change all my locks. Yeah.
Don't bother, man. Sawzall through the side of your doors got you in. Okay, so it's time for the tinfoil swan.
Our paranoid takeaway that'll help keep you safe online.
Okay, so this week's one is more about something to be aware of rather than a specific practice. By default, when you take any picture with a digital camera, it actually has something called metadata on every photo that will tell you where it was taken and when it was taken.
So that's like location services, right? Isn't that what you have on your phone or digital device?
Yeah, exactly. And for the most part, it can be helpful. If you take a bunch of pictures on vacation, it's kind of nice just to have like Google Photos say, the time you went to Acapulco. That's great. However, it's good to be aware of the fact that there are going to be situations where you do not want to have your location information loaded into a photo. If you're taking a picture of your kid on their first day of school, for instance, you probably don't want to have your coordinates there. If you are selling something online that's of great value, and you have the coordinates there, really what that's doing is leading a trail of breadcrumbs that lead straight to your house. So it's called a photo metadata.
So this is almost like the situation where someone on social media posted a picture of their kid next to a blackboard, and the blackboard had their name, their age, their favorite color, their school, their dog's name.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. The main thing to keep in mind is that even if you're sharing a photo, even if you take a photo that doesn't have any potentially sensitive data, there's still usually going to be information attached to that photo that has sensitive data. And it's a good idea to know how and when to disable that.
Now that you've made everybody paranoid, how do you turn off this metadata on their cameras?
On an iPhone, it's super easy. You just go to settings and then go down to your privacy option. And then there's a option for location services. And there will be a setting for your camera app. And then you just say never. You just change the app permissions and that will remove the location metadata. Pretty similar in an Android. Just by default, it has something called the Google Camera app, and that'll have settings, and there's a save location option on there. And you can just turn that off, and in both cases, that just means that you are effectively removing that metadata from your photos.
Well, so here's the deal. If you are going to take this advice, go to location services in your settings anyway, and make sure, okay, I have AccuWeather, for example. Definitely want to use location services for that. But you can choose if you have it, if you share location never, ask when you're using it, or only when you're using the app, or always. And then you can also choose whether or not you share the precise location or a general location. And you should go through on every single one and uncheck precise location.
You might want it when you're doing ride sharing, and you might want it when you're doing maps, but you don't necessarily, in fact, you absolutely don't want it when you're taking pictures for Instagram and things like that. So be very careful and make sure you know where you're providing your precise location.
So if you're listening to this podcast on a phone, just take it out really quickly and check your location settings. It's really one of the best ways to protect your own privacy.
Thanks so much for listening. If you like What the Hack, give it a good rating on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcast and review it. It's the best way for people to find the show and spread the word. What the Hack with Adam Levin is a production of Loud Tree Media.
It's produced by Andrew Stephen, the man with two first names.
You can find us online at loudtreemedia.com and on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Adam K. Levin.